This is gonna be a full breakdown of everything I actually use to make cinematic YouTube videos, not just the gear itself, but also how I use it and how often I use it. And before we start, don't feel like you need all of this. I didn't go out one day and drop 20 grand on camera stuff. I built this setup over years, sold all the gear to fund new stuff, and only kept the things I truly use. I know a lot of gear recommendation videos might be a bit too theoretical. That's why this one is based on what I actually bring on different kinds of shoots. For example, when I hiked 64 kilometers in 4 days on Mount Rinjani in Indonesia, but also for my regular tutorials and vlogs, which are pretty different video styles, so you know exactly what actually makes it into my bag. So, you're probably most interested in my cameras. I use 3 at the moment. My main workhorse is the Sony A7C Mark II, which films me right now. It's what I use for basically everything: vlogging, travel, talking head, A-roll, B-roll. Like, I've taken it all over Asia and it's super reliable and quite small, but also pretty powerful. The flip screen and autofocus are great for solo shooting. Image quality is top, also in low light. It shoots 4K and up to 60 frames per second, even with a crop, and with the right lenses you can get a really cinematic look easily. And my second camera is this one here, the i9 Mark III from Sony, ironically, which is kind of overkill for YouTube, but I use it specifically with longer lenses, mainly the 70-200 here. It has amazing autofocus, 4K 120p, a best Sony camera body, 24 megapixels, and no rolling shutter at all, which is helpful for anything fast-paced. Now, why is that my second camera and not my first one? The reason is simply that it grips much better for heavier lenses, like my 70-200 here, but I use those lenses and therefore the A9 less than my lighter 16-35mm G Master lens. So just because of that, it happens that I use the A7C Mark II more than my A9, because that's the lighter setup overall and therefore better for most of my shots, while the A9 and heavier lenses is more for specific shots. However, if I only bring one camera, it's the A9 definitely, because this one is clearly more capable, but it's nice to see that you don't actually need such an expensive camera to get great footage. And then there is the Fujifilm X-M5, which I use mostly as an overhead camera or second angle when I'm shooting by myself and need to stay ultra lightweight, because, well, it's tiny and the 6K open gate recording is super useful for reframing in post, plus the video quality is hard to distinguish from my Sony cameras with the right lenses. Now, why do I mostly shoot Sony then? The reason is actually mostly the ecosystem, because the lens choices are amazing, autofocus is honestly unbeatable for solo creators, and accessories like the ECM B1M mic integrate directly with the camera with no cables. Of course, there are other systems out there, like Panasonic or so, that offer some features that Sony holds back from us, which I hate, but Sony's system just kills it overall for what I do, and I would say also what most creators need. Now onto lenses, and I'm just gonna say it. About 80% of my shots come from just one lens, and that's this one here. That's the Sony 16-35mm f2.8 G Master Mark II. I bring this one on basically every trip, and I use it most of the time because it's wide enough for landscape shots and handheld vlogging, but also tight enough at 35mm to capture B-roll, and it gives you a good amount of background blur, even at 16mm for vlogging. If I could only bring one lens, this would be it, and this is also a big reason why I switched from APS-C cameras to full frame, because you just don't get that 16mm f2.8 full frame look with any APS-C lens, especially not while being able to zoom into 35mm at the same time. The second one is the Sony 70-200 f2.8 G Master Mark II. It's great for compression, detail shots, and when you want to isolate something further away. Now, it's certainly not a must-have lens and quite heavy compared to my other lenses, while being lightweight for what it is, like a 70-200 2.8. But the shots I get with this lens are so good that I never want to miss it. And it also complements the 16-35 here really nice because I can cover 50mm using APS-C crop. So I got the full range of 16 to 200mm covered with just two lenses at f2.8. Actually 300mm if I activate the crop at 200mm. Then we've got the Sony 35mm f1.4 G Master here. That's my favorite B-roll lens. The bokeh and overall look are super cinematic, and if you switch to APS-C mode, you basically get a 50mm f2.1, which is a really nice look for medium close-ups. So it's not a must-have lens as I already have the 16 to 35 here, but it looks so much better. And these three lenses are actually also the ones that I took onto the Rinjani hike together with the A9 and A7C Mark II. Of course, it's certainly not a super lightweight setup, but the footage speaks for itself. Now, our next question, of course, is which lens films me now for the A-roll here at my desk. For that, I use the Sirui VP1 24mm f1.4 Cine Prime. Now, it doesn't have autofocus, but since I don't move much when I'm sitting at my desk, that's totally fine, and the image out of this lens is just beautiful. It has this creamy yet sharp cine look that I really love, so I don't see any reason why I would use any other lens for this setup, and it's also quite affordable. And by the way, quick tip here, if you want to save some money, especially on more expensive G Master lenses, buy those lenses used. Like I bought the 70 to 200 here and the 35mm used, and they are in perfect condition. That saved me a lot of money, because even if it looks like that, I'm actually not rich at all. I actually have to look at my bank account every month. There are also a few other lenses I use occasionally. For example, this one here, the Viltrox 135mm f1.8. It's pretty heavy, but the shots you get with such lenses are just out of this world. And I'm also getting into herping right now to film snakes and other wildlife at night, so the f1.8 aperture helps a lot with that for low light. And at 135mm I can also keep some distance to the snakes, what I prefer for obvious reasons. I just didn't have much luck yet getting some in front of my camera fast enough, so it will take some time until the videos are coming. Then we also have the Sirui 85mm f1.4 here. It's light and fast for what it is, and quite sharp. I don't use it a ton, but 85mm is always good to have for certain shots, so if you go out and you have some space in your bag, just throw it in there and you will get some bangers with that. And there's also the Viltrox airline lenses, like the 20mm f2.8, which I reviewed some time ago, the 50mm f2 here, and 56 1.7 for APS-C. These are very simple lenses, but feature good image quality and cost less than $200, so great budget options if you want to save some money. And when I shot APS-C before, my favorite lens was clearly the Viltrox 27mm f1.2 here. I don't use it much anymore since I'm mostly on full frame, but it's still amazing for the Fujifilm X-M5, for example, because this lens just makes everything look beautiful, and it's quite affordable, so definitely something to look into. So you definitely can't get enough lenses because they actually change how your videos look. The camera is rather secondary, but of course all of that doesn't do much if your audio sucks. So let's come to microphones. I've tested quite a few mics over the years, but right now I mostly switch between three, depending on what I'm doing. For vlogging and run and gun shooting, I use the Sony ECM-B1M here. This mic just makes life easier because it's super small and it mounts directly to the hot shoe of your Sony cameras without requiring any cables. So there's less room for error, which I find important because it's so easy to mess it up. And of course also the audio quality is really good. And for anything wireless, like when I'm further away from the camera and stuff, I use the DJI Mic 2 here. Honestly, this is the best wireless mic I've ever used. It sounds great, the connection is rock solid, and it records internally in 32-bit float, which already saved me a couple of times when I forgot to check my levels or had some settings wrong. So I think this is a must-have for many A-roll shots, especially when you're outside. Just because you can be farther away from the camera, there are just so many more angles that you can get with such microphones. So these are the microphones I use all the time on the go. but here in my main A-roll setup, I use the Sennheiser MKE600 with a Zoom F3 XLR recorder to get it into the camera. I love this mic because it's super directional, offers really clean audio, and it's great to use as a boom mic like I do here. Now, the Zoom F3 recorder is sometimes a bit problematic as I use it without batteries, and PD chargers occasionally turn it off and it picks up electric noise if I charge the camera at the same time. So I would prefer to use the Sennheiser mic together with a direct XLR to hot shoe adapter instead of using cables, but I don't have the money for that right now, so that's something for the future. For voiceovers or screen recordings, I use the Shure MV7 Plus because that one's great at rejecting room tone, especially if you don't have perfect acoustic treatment like I don't. Just plug it into your Mac and you're good to go. The only downside is that it has to be close to your mouth, so it's in the frame, and that's also why I prefer to use it for screen recordings and voiceovers instead of for my regular videos. Oh, and if you're looking for one mic that can kind of do it all, the Rode VideoMic NTG here is probably your best bet. You can use it for vlogging, voiceovers and screen recordings via USB-C, and even as a boom mic for A-roll. But personally, I prefer having specialized tools now that I do this full time, and I don't constantly want to set things up for each shot. I just want to sit down, press a button, and it should start recording to save time. So dedicated tools for all of that are a must in my opinion, but I used that a lot before I got so many different microphones, especially when I traveled, because it just did everything for me except for wireless shooting. Alright, let's talk software before we come to other gear. My main editor is DaVinci Resolve. I've said it before and I still think it's the best value editor out there because it offers so many features that you don't have to buy many plugins. And these features are also really good. It's best for color grading, audio editing is great, visual effects, it's just insanely powerful. So definitely look into that. Now, I recently also started to use Final Cut Pro again for fast edits because it got some important updates recently that I can't live without, and it's just quicker as Resolve, like both when it comes to editing but also performance. I will share more about why and how I use both in an upcoming video, so wait for that. And yeah, those two are the backbone of my editing workflow. However, there is a third and really important one that saves me a ton of time, which is Gling AI, which is also the sponsor of today's video. If you're like me and you film a lot of talking head videos, you know how tedious it can be to go through all the footage just to cut out all the bad takes, silences and filler words. But it doesn't have to be like that because Gling AI makes this super easy and quick. You just load your talking head footage into the app and it automatically cuts out all the bad takes, long pauses and even those awkward ums and ahs. So instead of wasting an hour or so going through all the footage to clean it up yourself, you can quickly check everything with text-based editing, which pretty much works like editing a Word document, just easier. And once you're happy with it, you export the whole thing as an XML file and bring it into your editing software. From there, you just add B-roll and polish it up where Gling wasn't perfect, because even AI is not always perfectly on point. But that's not all. Gling also got a bunch of extra features. It can, for example, automatically zoom in and out on cuts to hide jump cuts, fix bad audio if your editing app doesn't support it, and even generate subtitles and chapters. And if you're working with multicam setups like overhead shots or podcast style videos with multiple camera angles, it handles that too. Best of all, it's surprisingly fast and it starts at just $10 a month. That's a no-brainer considering how much time it saves. There's also a free trial, so you can try it out yourself and see if the time savings are worth it for you. You will find the link to Gling in the description below. Of course, I use more software, for example also for planning my videos. There I use CraftDocs. It's just a clean space for writing ideas, structuring outlines and keeping everything organized together with databases, which is quite nice. I made a full video on how I plan my videos in Craft. You will find the link also in the description if you want to check that out. And for thumbnails and photos, I rotate between Lightroom, Photoshop, Affinity Photo and Lumina Neo. Lightroom is my go-to for general raw photo edits, but I could eliminate it already with Photomator. Photoshop I use mostly for generative AI, though I'm trying to move away from Adobe entirely. I just haven't found a perfect replacement yet for generative AI. Affinity Photo is awesome when I don't need generative AI. It's way lighter and more intuitive, so that's what I use to insert text and do general photo edits. And Lumina Neo is mostly great for their presets and special effects. For example, if I feel like I need to make a thumbnail pop a bit more without wanting to play around too much in Lightroom. And then there's ChatGPT. I literally use it for everything, like title suggestions, thumbnail ideas, business stuff, coding for my websites, cooking recipes, workout planning, and even writing the first draft of my scripts, because starting to write from an empty page is so much harder and takes so much longer as if you already have some maybe 50% decent text there. So it's a big time saver and it's kind of like my second brain at this point. And finally, for screen recordings, I use 1001 Record. That's a simple one-time purchase and never gave me any issues compared to Loom or other apps. It's very basic but just works, and that's exactly what I need. Okay, the next question is probably what I run all this software on. I currently edit on a 16-inch MacBook Pro M3 Max with 64 gigs of RAM. Gives me a desktop level performance anywhere, and I picked the 64 GB version because when I'm working in Resolve with a bunch of stuff open like Chrome, Lightroom, maybe even a script, I'm using around 58 gigs maximum. So 64 is kind of the sweet spot. 128 GB would be way too much, but 32 GB not enough. That said, I actually used to edit 4K videos fluidly on a MacBook Air M1 with 16 gigs of RAM before in Final Cut Pro though. So if you want to save money, you don't need the M3 Max Beast. Any of the M series Macs will get the job done for YouTube. Just increase the RAM to 64 or whatever you can afford. And of course what's available depending on your Mac. I have to say that even with the M3 Max, I sometimes get some lag in Resolve and even in Final Cut, but only when I'm doing really taxing things like noise reduction or heavy graphics and even titles in Resolve. Final Cut handles most of that, especially titles, a bit better, but real heavy stuff even lags there. So much about MacBooks. Of course, the screen at home should also be a bit bigger. That's why I use the Apple Studio display. And yeah, it's expensive, but if you're in an Apple ecosystem, it's just seamless. Continuity, for example, works flawlessly. It connects super fast, charges my MacBook while I'm doing my stuff. The colors look great and the audio sounds great as well. And that's why I got it. It's not just a screen for me, it's actually a tool that keeps my desk clean, because I don't have to put speakers on here. I don't need any dongles or any additional cables or so for charging. It's just a clean, minimalistic desk setup, and there is no other screen that would do all of that well. For accessories, I use the infamous Logitech MX Keys keyboard and MX Master mouse, mainly because of the backlit keys when I'm color grading in the dark, and for the extra customizable buttons on the mouse that speed up editing quite a lot. It actually makes a huge difference, so I can't recommend them enough for video editors. And for short-term storage, I have a custom Thunderbolt 4 SSD enclosure with a WD Black 2 TB SSD inside, super fast for current projects and easy to swap. And for long-term storage, I use a Synology 4-bay NAS currently filled with 25 TB. That's where all my completed videos and archives go. It runs quietly in the background and makes it easy when I have to dig up old footage. And lastly, I got the iPad Pro 11-inch M4 here, which I don't actually need for video production, but it's really nice to have, especially for checking scripts, transferring files, as an HDR color grading monitor, or for remote editing. I made a separate video on how I use the iPad in my workflow, so check that out if you're curious. The link is also in the description below. And there are also a few smaller, less important pieces of gear at first, ND filters. I use 3 variable ND filters currently, depending on the filter thread of the lens I want to use and whatever I shoot. Those 3 are the Hader Pro 2 CPL VND, the Nisi Swift system here, and the Polar Pro Chroma Black Mist VND CPL. They each have their own pros and cons, and I actually made a full comparison video breaking them all down. I will also link that in the description if you want to go a bit deeper about variable ND filters. To save money, I would say go with the Hader filter plus a random affordable mist filter. Just saves you a lot of money, and it's actually a really good variable ND filter. Alright, tripods. This video gets a bit longer than I expected. I keep this part pretty lean, but I also switched it up depending on the situation. For travel, I mostly use that Peak Design travel tripod here, the carbon fiber version, because it's compact, it's stable, oh, not like my camera here, and I've used it for over 3 years now without any issues at all. So this likely lasts forever, which is also why I bought it for its quite hefty price, because before I had to buy a new tripod almost every year. I also sometimes bring the Freewell travel tripod here, which is even lighter and much cheaper, but I already kind of broke one leg by pulling it out too hard. So yeah, great for weight, but you need to be gentle with it. And at home, I use the Potato Jet X Small Rig Tribex tripod here. This one is much heavier, but perfect when I need to switch between multiple angles quickly or just want to set up a shot as quick as possible, because the legs here, as you can see, extend hydraulically, so there's no faster way to get your camera in the right position than with this tripod. And of course, I need to carry all of that stuff, so let's talk camera bags. For chill days when I'm working from a cafe or only need one camera and smaller lenses, I use the Nomadic Peter McKinnon Luma bag here. Of course, it's compact, it's pretty lightweight, it looks clean and minimalistic and holds all the basic. Really love this bag. And for regular day trips or short hikes, I usually take the Wanted Provoke 21 liter. That one is a great balance between space and comfort, just enough room for 1 or 2 buddies, a few lenses and my drone, which by the way is currently the DJI Air 3 and will hopefully soon be the Mavic 4, because D-Log M sucks for HDR, so I want to have proper D-Log. But yeah, love this bag. It's also super stylish and also quite minimalistic, but it can just hold a bit more gear, and I like the padding here on the back that makes it a little bit more comfortable to carry. And for multi-day hikes or international travel where I only want to bring one bag, I go with the PJ Whitetech One Pro Flex 31 liters here, because it's super comfortable because of that 3D frame on the back. It fits a ton of gear and has a lot of smart compartments. I actually used it on my Rinjani trip and it did really well. I actually think that I would have hurt my back a lot without this bag. I also made a full video about this bag and all the other bags I used over the years with more details, so I will link them in the description as well. And last but certainly not least are the lights I use. My main key light is the Zhiyun B100 here, paired with a Godox 120cm softbox and a grid to control the light spill. That's what you're seeing in all of my A-roll shots here, like in this room at least. And then I use the Zhiyun B500 paired with a 90cm softbox as a more powerful light to move around for shooting in different locations in my house, and to complement the B500 and also for travel or flexible lighting setups outdoors, I use the Zhiyun X100 and X60 lights. They're small, battery powered and surprisingly bright, perfect for adding a bit of fill and texture on the go. Now, Zhiyun did send me all of those lights for free, to be transparent, but I would actually buy them now that I used them for about a year, maybe even longer, because they work so well. I don't need adapters for the B series lights, and the X series lights work with USB-C and batteries, so I don't need to bring an adapter for those on trips as well. And they all connect to the Zhiyun Vega app, so I can control all of them from one interface. I also use the ZSYB YG90 projector lens with a ZSYB CL80 BI LED video light, because that combo lets me project patterns onto wall, like simulating this window shadow here to the left, which I really like because it makes the background a bit more interesting. I used to use the SmallRig RC10C for that, but it overheated during long recordings, so I switched to the ZSYB setup now, which is more stable, especially if you're shooting long takes, and it's also pretty affordable affordable because I didn't want to spend much money on that. Now the small rig light is not bad, but it's just not intended for long sessions. It's more like a flashlight that you can bring around. So yeah, that's pretty much everything I actually use to make cinematic YouTube videos. Some of this gear I use almost daily, some only in very specific situations, and a lot of it I bought used or swapped out over time, and that's definitely something you should do as well, especially with lenses, cameras and microphones, because they generally last very long if treated well. Of course, be aware of scammers, but buying those things used is generally safe and can save a ton of money over time. More and more it adds up. And if you've got any gear you swear by, drop it in the comments below. It's always good to know what other creators use. And also everything I mentioned is linked below in the description if you want to check it out. And if you're specifically interested in my hiking camera gear, I made another video which you can watch here in the corner, because there are some additional tools I use that might be interesting for you.